First contact's deception. The gleaming spires of New Singapore rose through the morning mist, their surfaces deliberately weathered to appear less advanced than they truly were. Grand Admiral Chen Wei stood at his office window, watching a Zetheran shuttle descend from orbit with all the grace of a crystal swan. To their eyes, the city's architecture would seem impressive yet quaint, exactly as intended. Final confirmation. Admiral. His quantum AI assistant whispered through his neural link. The Zetheran sensors are only detecting our surface-level technology. All quantum shielding is holding. Wei allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had spent the last century preparing for this moment, ever since they'd discovered the crashed Zetheran scout ship in the Atacama Desert. The ship's damaged databanks had revealed an uncomfortable truth. The galaxy was dominated by the Zetheran Empire, a species that saw themselves as benevolent guardians of younger races. Their method of guardianship, however, involved carefully controlling and limiting the technological development of other species, for their own good, of course. Status of the Artemis Protocol. We subvocalized. All quantum cities successfully transitioned to pocket space. Surface infrastructure downgraded to approved technological levels. Civilian population briefed and in position. The performance begins in 3 minutes. The shuttle landed on the designated pad, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight in ways that would have seemed magical to humanity a century ago. Now I could spot at least 7 design flaws in its propulsion system. Amazing how an empire could stagnate when it believed it had nothing left to learn. Ambassador Sarah Chen, no relation, waited on the landing pad, dressed in deliberately old-fashioned diplomatic attire. Her neural augments were masked by quantum fields, making her appear completely baseline human to any scan. The Zetheran delegation emerged from their shuttle, their crystalline bodies shifting through patterns of blue and gold that they believed conveyed both authority and benevolence. "Welcome to Earth," Sarah said, executing a perfectly calculated bow. Not too deep, but just respectful enough. "I am Ambassador Chen. We are honored by your presence." The lead Zetheran, whose crystal patterns identify them as High Observer Vextari, rippled in what humans had learned was their expression of pleased superiority. "Your welcome is appreciated, young ones. We have watched your species' development with great interest." Through his neural link, Wei watched multiple quantum AIs analyze every frequency, every pattern, every subtle movement of the Zetheran delegation. Each moment provided new data, confirming what they'd learned from the crashed ship. The Zetheran's technology, while advanced, had barely progressed in 3 millennia. "We have so many questions," Sarah continued, her performance flawless. "Our scientists are particularly eager to learn from your wisdom. Though I must admit, some are nervous about advancing too quickly. Our history has taught us to be cautious with new technologies." Vextari's crystalline form sparkled with approval. "Wisdom rare in young species. Yes, technological development must be carefully guided. We have seen too many civilizations destroy themselves through unchecked advancement." Wei watched the exchange through quantum-enhanced senses that the Zetherans couldn't detect. Beneath the city, in pocket dimensions that defied the Empire's understanding of physics, humanity's true civilization hummed with power. Quantum computers that made the Zetherans' crystalline processors look like abacuses processed data from the encounter. Ships that could traverse galaxies in moments waited in dimensional spaces, while the Empire's advanced vessels crawled through normal space at mere light speed. The tour of New Singapore proceeded exactly as planned. Sarah led the delegation past carefully crafted examples of modern human technology. Fusion plants that struggled and sputtered exactly as they should, quantum computers that made endearing mistakes, prototype ships that looked impressive to primitive eyes, but would make any real human engineer cry. In his office, Wei received updates from around the globe. In Moscow, experimental gravity generators failed spectacularly but safely. In Cairo, scientists expressed appropriate awe at Zetheran medical technology that Earth had surpassed decades ago. In Rio, military leaders demonstrated weapons that looked advanced, but were practically museum pieces by true human standards. "Sir," his eye whispered, "we're detecting quantum scans from the Zetheran ship in orbit. They're trying to peek beneath the surface." "Let them find exactly what we prepared," White replied. The quantum shields would show underground bases with appropriately primitive technology, all carefully designed to reinforce the Empire's assumptions. The real bases, folded into dimensional spaces the Zetherans didn't know existed, remained invisible. As the day progressed, Y watched humanity perform its greatest deception. Every scientist, every diplomat, every civilian played their part perfectly. They showed appropriate awe at Zetheran technology, asked carefully crafted questions that revealed more about the Empire's limitations than they realized, and demonstrated just enough potential to be interesting but not threatening. By sunset, Vex Terry stood again by their shuttle, crystal form glowing with satisfaction. "Your species shows great promise," they announced. "The Empire will guide your development, ensure you avoid the pitfalls that have claimed so many others. In time, you may even join us among the stars." "We are grateful for your guidance," Sarah replied, bowing again. "We have much to learn." As the shuttle ascended, Wei allowed himself another small smile. Yes, humanity had much to learn. About the Empire's weaknesses, their blind spots, their assumptions. And when the time came to protect another truly young species from the Empire's benevolent control, humanity would be ready. The greatest advantage, after all, was being underestimated by those who thought themselves supreme. The Zetheran Empire was about to learn that lesson. They just didn't know it yet. The test of patience. 3 months into what the media dubbed the guidance period, Dr. Maya Patel stood in her deliberately antiquated laboratory at MIT, watching her team make carefully calculated mistakes. Above them, a Zetheran observer named Kexley hovered, their crystalline form emanating patterns of what humans had cataloged as educational satisfaction. "No, no," Kexley chimed, their resonance frequencies being secretly recorded by quantum sensors disguised as basic lab equipment. "Your approach to quantum entanglement is charming, but fundamentally flawed. Observe." The alien proceeded to demonstrate what they considered advanced quantum manipulation. Maya forced her expression to remain one of wonder and confusion, despite the fact that her daughter's science project last year had achieved more sophisticated results. "Fascinating," she breathed, her neural augments transmitting every detail of the demonstration to the real quantum research facility hidden beneath the Antarctic ice. "Though I confess much of this exceeds our current theoretical framework." Through her concealed neural link, she received an analysis from Dr. Amit Verma in Antarctica. Their quantum manipulation relies entirely on crystalline resonance. They never discovered bioelectric quantum interfaces, uploading analysis to the Prometheus database. The Zetherans' demonstration continued, each moment revealing more about their technological limitations than their capabilities. Maya's team played their roles perfectly, asking questions just naive enough to be believable, making mistakes just sophisticated enough to show promise, and demonstrating enthusiasm tempered by carefully crafted humility. In orbit, aboard the Zetheran diplomatic vessel Crystal Wisdom, Junior Ambassador David Chen sat through another excruciating dinner with High Observer Vex Terry. The food was created by molecular assemblers that humanity had improved upon decades ago, but David made appropriate sounds of amazement with each bite. "Your species adapts remarkably well," Vex Terry observed, their crystalline form shifting through patterns of analytical interest. "Most young races require more time to acclimate to our level of technology." "We're very motivated to learn," David replied, using his chopsticks rather than the advanced utensils provided. The deliberate choice made Vex Terry's patterns shift to what their cultural database identified as paternal amusement. "Yes, but learning must be properly paced. We have seen too many species reach too far, too fast." The results were unfortunate. Through quantum channels undetectable to Zetheran sensors, David's neural link transmitted the conversation to the Strategic Analysis Division. Every word, every crystal pattern, every subtle threat was cataloged and analyzed. Back on Earth, in the quantum-shielded heart of Mount Fuji, Fleet Admiral Yuki Tanaka reviewed the latest intelligence. The Zetheran Empire's guidance followed predictable patterns. First technology assessment, then controlled introduction of advanced concepts, followed by integration into their economic sphere, and finally, complete technological dependence. They're right on schedule, her AI assistant noted. Cultural database indicates they'll begin introducing trade restrictions within the next 2 weeks. Yuki nodded, watching real-time feeds from quantum sensors throughout the solar system. In dimensional pockets beyond Zetheran detection, humanity's true fleet waited. Ships that could cross galaxies in moments, weapons that could reshape reality, defenses that made the Empire's best efforts look like stone walls against nuclear weapons. "How's Project Oracle progressing?" she asked. "The predictive models are at 99.9% accuracy. The Zetherans haven't deviated from expected behavioral patterns in 3 millennia. Their response to any given situation can be predicted with near certainty." The real test came a week later. Following the Oracle's predictions exactly, the Zetherans introduced their first trade proposal. The terms were designed to seem generous while gradually making Earth dependent on Imperial technology. In Geneva, the UN Security Council put on a magnificent show of debate. Some nations expressed excitement at the opportunities. Others voiced careful concerns about moving too quickly. The final resolution, accepting limited trade under strict conditions, made the Zetheran delegation's crystal patterns pulse with approval. "A wise choice," Vex Terry announced to the assembled diplomats. "Your caution speaks well of your species' maturity." David, watching from the gallery, kept his expression carefully neutral. Through his neural link, he monitored the quantum traffic as humanity's true manufacturing facilities, hidden in pocket dimensions, analyzed every sample of Zetheran technology. Each trade good, each demonstration unit, each generous gift revealed more about the Empire's technological foundation. In her MIT lab, Maya continued her performance of steady but limited progress. Each breakthrough was carefully calculated to reinforce Zetheran assumptions while probing their responses. When her team accidentally achieved a minor quantum effect that the Empire considered advanced, Kexley's crystal patterns shifted through surprise to satisfaction. "Remarkable intuition," the observer chimed. "Though you must be careful not to push too far too quickly. Perhaps we should review some basic principles." Maya sat through another condescending lecture, her quantum implants recording every detail. In Antarctica, Dr. Verma's team added more data to their growing understanding of Zetheran psychological patterns. The Empire's need to control, to guide, to maintain their position of superiority made them blind to the possibility that their primitive students might have already surpassed them. As the day ended, David stood in his apartment overlooking New Singapore, watching Zetheran ships cruise between the deliberately antiquated skyscrapers. Through quantum channels, he received updates from around the globe. Every interaction, every demonstration, every trade discussion went exactly according to humanity's plans. The Empire hasn't approved any significant technological advances in over 2,000 years, his AI assistant noted. They're so focused on controlling others' development that they've forgotten how to advance themselves. David smiled, watching the crystalline ships that the Empire thought represented the peak of possible technology. Humanity's patience would continue, for now. But somewhere out there, another young species would eventually need protection from the Empire's benevolent guidance. And when that day came, the Zetherans would learn that 3,000 years of stagnation wrapped in superiority made for a very fragile empire indeed. Cracks in the facade. The first real test of humanity's deception came not from Zetheran's suspicion, but from nature itself. When the Proxima Centauri colony's star began showing signs of unprecedented flare activity, High Observer Vex Terry's response was predictably patronizing. Your colony's shielding will prove inadequate, they announced, crystal form pulsing with what humans had learned to recognize as smug concern. Fortunately, we anticipated such limitations. Imperial vessels stand ready to evacuate your settlers. Governor Elena Rodriguez kept her face carefully composed, showing just the right mixture of worry and gratitude. Through her quantum link, she monitored the real situation. The colony's true defenses, hidden in pocket dimensions, could withstand a supernova. The visible shields were merely props in humanity's ongoing performance. "We're deeply grateful," she replied, adding a slight tremor to her voice. "Though some of our scientists believe they may have a solution." Vexteri's crystalline pattern shifted to what their database labeled as indulgent amusement. "Your species' determination is admirable, but solar dynamics are beyond your current understanding. Allow us to handle this crisis." In the quantum-shielded command center beneath Olympus Mons, Admiral Wei watched the situation unfold. "Status of Operation Sandcastle," he subvocalized. "All colonial quantum shields are masked," his AI responded. "Surface installations showing appropriate stress levels. Civilian population ready to perform evacuation protocols if necessary. Zetheran sensors detecting exactly what we want them to see." The stellar flare, when it came, was more powerful than even the Empire's models predicted. Zetheran ships moved into position, their crews confident in their role as saviors. Then something unexpected happened. The colony's primitive shields held. Through quantum channels, Wei watched Vexteri's crystalline form cycle through patterns of confusion and disbelief. The Empire's sensors showed nothing unusual, just standard magnetic shielding operating somehow beyond its theoretical limits. "Remarkable," Kexley chimed, hovering in the colony's control center. "Your shield harmonics have achieved unexpected resonance patterns." "Most fortunate," Dr. Patel, who had been sent to assist the colony scientists, maintained her carefully crafted expression of surprised relief. "We're still analyzing the data ourselves. Perhaps the interaction between our field generators and the stellar radiation produced unforeseen effects." The Zetheran observers spent days analyzing the shields, finding nothing that contradicted their understanding of physics, just an apparently lucky confluence of factors that they attributed to human ingenuity within acceptable primitive bounds. But the incident created the first crack in their certainty. In the following weeks, similar coincidences accumulated. A quantum communication experiment produced unexpectedly stable results. A prototype fusion reactor achieved slightly better efficiency than Imperial models predicted possible. Small things, each easily explained away, but forming a pattern that some younger Zetheran observers began to notice. During a diplomatic reception in New Singapore, David Chen overheard two junior observers, their crystal patterns showing signs of agitation. "Their development curve exceeds standard parameters," one chimed softly. "Even with our guidance, their progress is unusual. They're still centuries behind true advancement," the other responded. "These apparent leaps come from novel applications of basic principles, nothing more." David kept his expression neutral as he sipped his wine, his quantum implants recording every frequency of their conversation. Through his neural link, he received an update from strategic analysis. Zetheran uncertainty levels rising. Implementing protocol masterpiece. The next day, humanity arranged a spectacular failure, a very public attempt at dimensional folding, using deliberately obsolete technology, ended in a carefully controlled explosion. The Empire's observers relaxed, their crystal patterns returning to standard superiority frequencies. But not everyone was convinced. Junior observer Lexti, assigned to monitor Earth's quantum research, began noticing patterns that troubled their crystalline circuits. Human mistakes were too consistent, their failures too neat, their successes too conveniently within acceptable parameters. In their private database, encrypted by what they believed to be unbreakable quantum codes, Lexti began compiling observations. Through channels they didn't know humanity could access, Wei watched their analysis with growing interest. "They're sharper than most," he commented to his eye. "Increase surveillance on observer Lexte. Let's see how close they get to the truth." The real crisis came when a Zetheran deep space probe detected anomalous readings near Jupiter. For a fraction of a second, their sensors registered energy patterns that their physics said were impossible. The Empire launched a full investigation, sending their most advanced survey ships to the region. They found nothing, of course. The quantum city that had briefly flickered into normal space had vanished back into its pocket dimension, leaving no trace that Imperial science could detect. But questions began to surface in classified Zetheran communications. Implementation of Protocol Wounded Bird, way ordered. Over the next week, human scientists released a series of papers theorizing about energy patterns that almost, but not quite, explained what the probe had detected. The theories were convincing enough to provide a plausible explanation, while being just wrong enough to reinforce the Empire's sense of superiority. Their imagination exceeds their grasp, High Observer Vex Terry declared after reviewing the papers. They see patterns their science cannot yet explain, and fill the gaps with creative but flawed hypotheses. But in their private communications, encrypted by systems they believe secure, some younger observers continued to express doubts. Humanity's progress, while still well within acceptable parameters, showed patterns that defied statistical models based on 3,000 years of guiding other species. In her MIT lab, Maya continued her careful dance of progress and limitation. Each experiment, each question, each carefully planned failure added to the Empire's database while revealing more about their technological foundations. The cracks in their certainty grew, but slowly enough to be dismissed. "We're approaching a critical threshold," Waze AI warned. "Statistical analysis suggests the Empire will implement increased monitoring protocols within 60 days. We smiled, watching real-time quantum feeds from across the solar system. Everything was proceeding exactly as humanity's models had predicted. The Empire's growing unease, their subtle increase in surveillance, their careful reinforcement of their own superiority. All of it followed patterns established over millennia of stagnation. The stage was set for the next act in humanity's performance. And when the Empire finally discovered another truly primitive species, all these carefully laid groundwork would serve its true purpose. The cracks in their facade were precisely engineered, just wide enough to make the final revelation believable, but not so wide as to trigger premature suspicion. After all, the best deceptions were those that the target convinced themselves were impossible. The games we play. The message that caused humanity's carefully crafted performance to enter its final phase came through channels the Zetheran Empire didn't know existed. A quantum probe, hidden in pocket space near the Carina Nebula, detected an Imperial survey fleet approaching the solar system containing a pre-industrial civilization. In his quantum-shielded office beneath Mount Fuji, Admiral Yuki Tanaka reviewed the data with growing concern. The Drachnid species had just discovered steam power. Their cities gleamed with the first lights of industrialization. Their scientists were making their first tentative steps toward understanding electricity, and their philosophers were beginning to question their place in the cosmos. They were, in short, perfect candidates for Imperial guidance. "Initiate Protocol Endgame," she ordered through her neural link. Across Earth and its hidden colonies, humanity's true civilization began its final preparations while maintaining its mask of primitive development. In MIT's carefully antiquated laboratory, Dr. Maya Patel deliberately increased the accidental success rate of her quantum experiments. Not enough to raise immediate alarms, but sufficient to draw increased Imperial attention. "Most impressive," Observer Kexley chimed, their crystalline form showing patterns of both approval and slight concern. "Though perhaps we should review the safety protocols for these attempts." Through quantum channels, Maya received confirmation that every breakthrough was being carefully monitored by Imperial analysts. The pattern of successes was designed to suggest a species on the verge of a technological leap, exactly the kind of situation that would demand increased Imperial oversight. In orbit, Aboard the Crystal Wisdom, David Chin attended another diplomatic dinner with High Observer Vex Terry. The conversation, as predicted by Project Oracle, turned to the Empire's role as guardians of developing species. "We have guided many civilizations through their technological adolescence," Vex Terry announced, their crystal patterns radiating ancient pride. Each required different approaches, different levels of intervention, and all of them benefited from imperial wisdom. David asked, allowing just a hint of carefully calculated doubt to color his tone. The High Observer's patterns shifted to what humanity's cultural database identified as defensive superiority. The alternatives have proven unfortunate. Species left to develop without guidance inevitably destroy themselves or become threats to galactic stability. Through his neural link, David monitored quantum traffic from the Carina Nebula. The Imperial Survey Fleet had begun its first scans of the Drachnid homeworld. Soon, they would implement their standard first contact protocols, beginning another cycle of technological suppression disguised as benevolent guidance. Unless humanity had something to say about it, the game entered its most dangerous phase. In laboratories across Earth, human scientists began making discoveries that pushed against the boundaries of what the Empire considered acceptable progress. Each breakthrough was carefully calculated to draw attention while appearing to stay just within the realm of fortunate accidents and novel applications of basic principles. Observer Lex T, whose earlier doubts had been carefully nurtured by human intelligence operations, began compiling a more detailed analysis of these patterns. Their encrypted reports to Imperial High Command contained phrases like statistical anomalies and developmental irregularities. In the quantum cities hidden from Imperial sensors, humanity's true civilization continued its preparations. Ships that could traverse galaxies in moments were moved into position, their existence concealed in dimensional spaces that the Empire's physics said were impossible. The first real test came when an Imperial deep space sensor array detected unusual energy patterns near Saturn. For 2.3 seconds, a quantum city had deliberately allowed its shields to fluctuate, giving the Empire's instruments a glimpse of something their science said couldn't exist. The response was immediate. 3 Imperial science vessels, accompanied by what the Empire considered heavy military escorts, diverted from their planned routes to investigate. "They're scanning the entire Saturn system," Waze AI reported, "using everything in their arsenal." "Show them exactly what we want them to see," Way ordered. When the Imperial ships arrived, they found a research station operating exactly at the level of technology the Empire expected from humanity. The station's personnel expressed appropriate awe at the crystalline vessels, while continuing their primitive experiments with Saturn's rings. But the Empire's analysts couldn't quite explain the energy patterns their sensors had detected. The humans' theories about novel interactions between their experimental equipment and Saturn's magnetic field were plausible, but not entirely satisfying. In their encrypted communications, which humanity monitored through quantum channels the Empire thought impossible, debates raged among the younger observers. Some argued for increased restrictions on human technological development. Others insisted that humanity's progress, while unusual, remained within acceptable parameters. The older observers, comfortable in their certainty of imperial superiority, dismissed these concerns. 3,000 years of unchallenged dominance had made them unable to conceive of a species advancing beyond their control. Through it all, humanity maintained its deception. Each breakthrough was followed by a carefully planned setback. Each success was balanced by a calculated failure. The pattern was designed to keep the Empire off balance, while never quite triggering their intervention protocols. But time was running out. The Imperial fleet in the Carina Nebula had completed its initial survey of the Drachnid civilization. Soon, they would begin their standard first contact procedures, beginning another cycle of technological suppression. In her Antarctic command center, Dr. Verma monitored the quantum traffic from human probes near the Drachnid system. The Imperial ships were preparing their impressive displays of technological superiority. Displays that would seem like magic to the Drachnids, but were child's play compared to humanity's true capabilities. All quantum fleets in position, her AI reported. Dimensional shields at maximum efficiency. The Empire's sensors won't detect us until we want them to. The stage was set for humanity's grand revelation. All the careful groundwork, the pattern of suspiciously consistent progress, the unexplained energy readings, the statistical anomalies that younger observers had noticed, would serve to make the impossible seem just plausible enough when the truth was finally revealed. As David Chen attended another diplomatic function aboard the Crystal Wisdom, he received a quantum message that made him smile behind his carefully maintained expression of polite interest. Operation Endgame is go. Revelation begins in 48 hours. The Empire's 3,000 years of technological stagnation were about to meet humanity's century of hidden progress, and the Drachnid civilization would be the catalyst for a change that would reshape the galaxy. The game was almost over. It was time for humanity to show its cards. Masks off. The Imperial Survey Fleet moved into position above the Drachnid homeworld, their crystalline ships arranged in a display pattern perfected over 3 millennia of first contacts. Below, steam-powered cities spread across continents, their industrial revolution about to be interrupted by the Empire's benevolent guidance. They never saw the human ships coming. One moment, the Imperial sensors showed only the expected readings of a pre-industrial civilization. The next, quantum ripples cascaded through reality as humanity's true fleet emerged from pocket dimensions the Empire's science said couldn't exist. In his command chair aboard the HS Prometheus, Admiral Y watched the Imperial ship's crystal patterns shift through frequencies indicating shock, disbelief, and for the first time in 3,000 years, fear. This is Admiral Y of the Human Stellar Federation. He transmitted on all frequencies, including quantum channels the Empire didn't know existed. Your first contact protocols end here. Aboard the Crystal Wisdom, still in Earth orbit, High Observer Vexteri's form vibrated with patterns never before recorded in Imperial history. Through quantum feeds, Y watched their crystalline structure nearly destabilize as they processed the sensor data from the Drachnid system. The human ships weren't just more advanced than Imperial technology. They represented science the Empire had deemed impossible. Dimensional drives that ignored normal spacetime, quantum shields that could withstand the heart of a star, weapons that could rewrite reality itself. This is impossible, Vexteri chimed, their usual confidence shattered. Your species, we've been monitoring your development. No, David Chen replied, standing in the Crystal Wisdom's command center, finally dropping the mask of diplomatic deference. You've been monitoring exactly what we wanted you to see. Across Earth, humanity's true civilization emerged from its quantum shroud. Cities hidden in pocket space became visible, their technology so advanced it would have seemed like magic even to the Empire at its height. The carefully maintained facade of primitive development dissolved, revealing a species that had surpassed their would-be guides generations ago. In her MIT lab, Dr. Maya Patel smiled as she deactivated the quantum fields hiding her real equipment. Observer Kexley's crystalline form pulsed with patterns indicating cognitive dissonance as they watched what they had dismissed as primitive instruments transform into technology beyond Imperial understanding. How? Kexley's resonance frequencies wavered. When? The crashed ship in the Atacama Desert. Maya explained, enjoying the freedom to finally speak plainly. You should really be more careful with your scout vessels. We learned so much from its database, including exactly how to appear non-threatening to Imperial sensors. In the Carina Nebula, humanity's quantum fleet surrounded the Imperial survey ships. The Drachnid civilization below remained unaware of the drama unfolding in their sky, their first glimpse of alien life delayed but not denied. For a century, we've watched you guide other species, Way transmitted to the Imperial fleet. We've seen how you limit their development, how you ensure no one threatens your dominion. That ends today. Through quantum channels, he received updates from across the galaxy. Human ships, hidden in dimensional pockets for decades, emerged near every world under imperial guidance, not to threaten or dominate, but to ensure the Empire couldn't retaliate against their revelation. In the Empire's capital system, their greatest ships found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had been watching from quantum shadows for years. The message was clear. Humanity could have struck at any time, but had chosen diplomacy instead. Your empire stands at a crossroads, Wei continued, his words transmitted to every imperial world and ship. You can accept that your role as sole guardians of galactic civilization has ended, or he left the alternative unspoken. The Empire's sensors told them everything they needed to know about humanity's capabilities. In orbit above Earth, aboard the Crystal Wisdom, High Observer Vexteri's crystal patterns finally stabilized into something new, something their species hadn't expressed in 3,000 years. Humility. How many? They asked David. How many of your hidden cities? Your quantum ships? David smiled. Enough to ensure that every species gets the chance to develop on their own terms. We'll still be watching, still ready to help prevent genuine catastrophes. But no more artificial limitations, no more controlled development. Across imperial space, younger observers who had noticed the patterns in humanity's development felt vindication. Their suspicions had been correct. They simply hadn't imagined the full scope of the deception. In the Drachnid system, Wei opened a channel to the Imperial Fleet's commander. Your ships will remain in orbit, but under our supervision. When the Drachnids are ready for first contact, they'll meet both our civilizations as equals. Not as subjects to be guided, but as potential partners to be welcomed. The Imperial ship's crystal patterns shifted through various frequencies before settling into acceptance. 3,000 years of certainty had been upended in a single day. On Earth, humanity celebrated not just their revelation, but the beginning of a new era. The quantum cities fully emerged, their true glory finally visible to all. Ships that had hidden in pocket dimensions soared openly through the skies. Scientists who had played at ignorance began publishing their real research, sharing discoveries that would reshape understanding of the universe. In her Antarctic command center, Dr. Verma watched the Drachnid civilization, continuing their industrial revolution, unaware that their future had just been radically altered. Was it worth it? She asked Wei through their quantum link. All the deception, the hidden development, the century of wearing masks. Wei thought of the dozens of species now free to develop on their own terms, of the Empire forced to confront its own stagnation, of a galaxy about to experience true technological renaissance. Ask the next species that reaches for the stars, he replied. When they do so without imperial restraints, without artificial limitations, without having to hide their true potential, that will be our answer. The game was over. The masks were off. And in the skies above 100 worlds, humanity's ships stood ready to ensure that no species would ever again have to hide their light from those who feared its brightness. After 3,000 years, the Empire had finally met a species that smiled at their power, hiding not in fear, but in preparation for this very moment. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, another young species took their first steps toward the stars, unaware that when they finally looked up, they would find not masters bearing chains of guidance, but equals offering hands of friendship. The future was wide open, and humanity would make sure it stayed that way.